Hello and welcome to the Craft Beer Corner. For today's beer review, we're jumping into a beer sub-style that is not that common. We've only reviewed a couple of them in the last couple of years here, but I found another one popped up in my feed from Tavour, so I did grab it. We're going to be jumping over to Kings County Brewers Collective today. It's been a while since I've had one of their beers. They, for everything I've tried, make consistently very good beers. This specific one today is called Morbid Hour, and it is a black Pilsner. So it is going to be looking dark like a stout or a porter, but it is indeed a Pilsner. And this specific one clocks in at 4.6% ABV. Kings County Brewers Collective is based in Brooklyn, New York. And they also gave us the hop bill on this one, which you don't get that often on Pilsners, but they brewed this one with Magnum and Willamette. So very nice blend of hops there to go with this beer style. Morbid Hour, you can kind of see, I'll try to angle it away. They always have really cool label art on their beers. This is no exception. Got kind of death hovering over, I don't know, it almost looks like a goblin goblet filled with presumably black Pilsner. So let's get this cracked gently. We're going to use our standard Pilsner glass today. Get this one poured right in. All right, going to be pretty gentle with it, so it's not going to have a problem forming a head. And I'm going to try to get as much as I can in here. This glass doesn't hold quite 16 ounces, I don't believe. It's a little bit lower than that. It probably would if that head settles. So, visually, as expected, as it is indicated, it is a black Pilsner. Visually speaking, this is actually surprisingly pitch black. I cannot see anything through this glass. That is surprising. Normally a black Pilsner, they're very dark, but they're not pitch black like a stout. This one is obviously a Pilsner, forms a nice head here. Very active in terms of carbonation, so I expect most of this to settle down with a nice little pad floating on top. Let's get right up over it for a sniff. Yep. Yeah, these are a very interesting and very cool beer style for my money, and the aroma really kind of lets you know what you're getting into before you get into it. So everything about this beer is a Pilsner. So it is a lager. It's brewed with standard Pilsner malts and the same processes, and typically they're going to use pretty normal Pilsner hop bill. This one going a little different kind of avenue with this. So Magnum, obviously, that's not a prototypical hop used in a Pilsner. Neither is Willamette, but a nice balance. So what you get on the aroma on this smells like a normal Pilsner. It's got that very classic kind of earthy, bready, doughy aroma to it, but underneath that, you can really smell that roasty malt to it. So black Pilsner, what is it? We've talked about this on the past few reviews. If you haven't seen it, it is a Pilsner, but in addition to normal Pilsner ingredients and processes, they also use darker malts in it, hence why it's black, and hence the name. But it is a Pilsner. It is not an ale. It is still a lager. It's everything that you love about a Pilsner. It's just got these darker malts in there. So that does tend to add this underlying richness and roasty side to it that you do not normally find in a Pilsner, of course, and it's quite tasty. So this one smells very good. The malt bill is really coming through very clearly. There's a lot of roast, a lot of that doughiness, and there's actually a little bit of a chocolatey kind of undertone coming off of this one. What I don't smell in this beer, which is a little bit surprising considering the two that they use, I'm not really picking up any really pronounced hop aromas. Normally in a Pilsner, you're going to pick up some hop aromas coming off of it. This one, it's really malt-centric on the nose, but it smells great, looks great. Let's jump right in, see what this one's about. Oh, yeah. Oh, wow. Well, that's very nice. So, this has a very pronounced roasty edge to that malt bill. Obviously, we saw that it was absolutely jet black, no light, you could see through it at all. So I knew that they used some very dark roasted malts in this beer, and obviously a fair bit of them. So the flavor profile on this kind of reminds me a little bit of a cross between a standard black lager or a Schwarzbier, like a German Schwarzbier, black beer. But it is clearly in a Pilsner style. So you are getting this underlying kind of baked good bread, doughy-like quality you would normally associate with a Pilsner. And that comes kind of pretty quick up front. And then the roasty edge of this malt bill really kind of just balloons in intensity and kind of overtakes everything else. And there's a lot of roast. There is a good bit of chocolate, like I smelled on the aroma, is absolutely translating into this glass in the flavor profile. And that kind of intensifies, backs down a little bit, and then kind of the underlying baked good qualities start to rise back up out of it and mix with that roasty edge. So instead of normal kind of toast and biscuit cracker and crust, it's almost like really deeply caramelized version of that same thing, owing due to these dark roasted malts that they put in there. So it does still have these common threads, these commonalities that you would expect to find in a Pils, but it's just got a heck of a lot more depth of flavor and richness of flavor to it. So we're talking very deeply browned bread, very deeply browned toast, but it does still have that very baked good quality about it. In terms of the hops and how they translate in the flavor profile, I couldn't really pick them up on the aroma, and honestly, I'm not really getting any big kind of input from them in the flavor profile in this glass either. There was a little bit of bitters, but using Magnum in particular and Willamette as well, I would have expected some bigger kind of almost West Coast style hop influence to be present in this glass, and it's not. So it's not overly hoppy. It's just a nice, well done, really focused intently on the malt bill black Pilsner, and it's very, very nice. Texturally, just like a normal Pilsner, it's light. It's got a lot of carbonation and effervescence you can feel, and when you agitate around the palate, it does get quite creamy. Also notably different on this one, most Pilsners, you get a little bit of a crisp drying effect on the end of the finish. That is not happening here. They also don't typically have a very long or pronounced length of the finish. This one is different in that respect as well. The roast edge of this malt is very intense, and it does push the length out of this far longer than your average Pilsner. So you can look at this almost like a hybrid beer style. You know, take a Pilsner and mix it with a Schwarzbier, and then that probably most closely approximates what you're getting in this. Though I've got to state again just how really intense the roasted malts, the very deeply roasted, the malts bringing in this depth of color are in this. So there's a very big pungency, a very dark roasted malt, and that is kind of the driving factor in this. Overall, very nice and still very crisp and refreshing as a Pilsner should be. So I'm going to jump back in for the body, thinking that a bit. I was really focusing on the flavor profile as I was drinking it and noticed texturally the mouthfeel. But I'm going to jump back in one more sip, explore this body, and let these flavors intensify, see if I missed anything. The body on this does feel more robust than your average Pilsner. Even though it's really just in standard Pilsner range, it does feel like it has a lot more heft to it. I would say this is a solid medium body, which is quite a bit more robust than I would expect on a Pilsner in the 4.6 ABV range. But it's got a real breadth to it. On second sip, that intensification, everything that I got in the first sip is coming through again. It's just a little more pronounced because it's flavor stacked on top of flavor on this second sip. It's really, really delicious. The roasty edge to this is just tremendous. It's got a really nice flavor profile to it, and I really like how the classic elements of the Pilsner malt bill are mixing with these darker, roastier elements. It's really, really nice, very enjoyable, and certainly a unique beer drinking experience. You don't get a lot of black Pilsners. I was really quite excited when I saw this one pop in Tavour. I'm glad I got it. So yeah, second sip again, I can tell you, again, yeah, there's some bitters up front, but it's not noticeable as, oh, that's coming from this hop or this hop variety. Like Magnum or a pretty common West Coast style hop to kind of have a lot of resinous pine undertones. and some citrus, and I'm not really getting any of that at all. I think the bulk of the bitters I'm getting in this are really coming from the roasty edge of the malt, but it's absolutely delicious, and I love it. I'm going to take my time, sip on this one, come up with my scores. When we come back, we'll get this beer ranked from top to bottom. All right, now that we've gotten to enjoy this beer, we're going to get it ranked. This was Kings County Brewers Collective's Morbid Hour, a black Pilsner clocking in at 4.6% ABV. Kings County Brewers is based in Brooklyn, New York. So starting with the aroma on this beer was fantastic. It did have a very pronounced roasty malt aroma to it. There was almost this chocolatey aroma to it. And there was some underlying baked good quality you normally would associate with the malt bill of a Pilsner. Just in this case, it was clearly a lot more roasted. What I really didn't pick up, even though they added some really nice hops for it, I didn't pick up a lot of hop aroma. Aroma-wise, it was very dominant in terms of the malt bill, but it smelled fantastic and had great pungency. The aroma does get a perfect 10 out of 10. For the taste, overall, I really enjoyed this beer. Really, the only thing that held it back for me was, again, the hops. I would have liked to have some clarity of presence from the hops. Really, all of the bitters seemed to be coming from the malt bill. There was nothing that really tasted like hop. And with the hops that they chose, I was kind of expecting it, and I think it would have paired very well and kind of anchored it more into true Pilsner style. But a minor nitpick, I only docked 1 point. Taste gets a 9 out of 10. For the body, overall, the body was, more or less in the range I expected. It was certainly above average. This is a lower than average ABV for kind of a Pilsner, be it black or otherwise. But overall, this was not a super heavy body. I didn't expect it to be, but for the ABV range, I expected just a little more heft, especially with the amount of malts extra they have to use to extract to get the ABV up due to the higher roasted content here. But above average, body gets a 7 out of 10. For the mouthfeel on this, on the other hand, was exactly what I expected. Had the right amount of resistance. It got very, very creamy when you agitated around the palate. It felt like a Pilsner, and overall, it was just textbook, black or otherwise. Mouthfeel does get a perfect 10 out of 10. For the finish on this one was significantly longer than your average Pilsner, and considering that there was really no hop presence, so to speak, I was very impressed by the length of the finish on this. It really, really pushed out long after each sip, and that really came down to the depth and intensity of flavor from the roasted malts. The one thing that was missing on the finish on this beer specifically was just any discernible drying effect. Not even the slightest bit of a dry crispness on the end, but again, just a minor nitpick. I docked 1 point there. The finish does get a 9 out of 10. For the head and retention, this one formed a pretty good head. It was above average overall. This one didn't stick around quite like you would expect from your average Pilsner, but it formed a pretty nice one, and it did stick around a fair bit of time. Head and retention gets a 7 out of 10. For the appearance, this was even darker than I expected. It's still a Pilsner, only 4.6, but it was absolutely pitch black. Appearance gets a 10 out of 10. For the balance, overall, I really enjoyed the balance on this beer, and particularly since this was really the discernible forefront was the malt bill. I thought it was exceptionally well chosen, and it had the heart and spirit of a Pilsner. Again, coming back to the hop trait, this was the one thing that held it back from a perfect score for the balance for me. I needed more hop presence both in terms of aroma and in the flavor profile. A little bit goes a long way. It's not an IPA, it's a Pilsner, but you should be able to have some presence from the hops. That was missing here. But a testament to how well balanced it was otherwise is the score. It is well above average. It gets an 8 out of 10. Feeling in the intangibles, subjectively, I loved it. I gave it a 10 out of 10. Finally, an example of the style. So overall, this beer did very well in most categories. There were just a few where it lost some points, and it was over very specific things, but this is well above average. Example of the style does get a 9 out of 10, which brings the total score on Kings County Brewers Collective Morbid Hour to an 89 out of 100. So black Pilsners are not a very common style. It's not something you see every day. I always like to grab them when I see them. They're always unique. This one, as I said, did kind of remind me of a cross between, say, a Schwarzbier and a Pils. It had a lot going for it, and I really, really enjoyed it, and particularly The malts that they chose for the malt bill on the roasty side, very, very well done. An excellent beer that I would recommend to fans of any dark beer or Pilsners in general. Folks, that's today's review. As always, I do sincerely appreciate you tuning in today. Please don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe. And if you want to stay in the loop when our videos go live, just turn on your notifications, hit the bell icon. It is right next to the subscribe button. Until next time, keep it beer, keep it craft. We'll see you on the next one. Cheers.